You know what's absolutely insane? Right now, as I'm talking to you, there's a silent war happening in the Philippines. Not with guns, not with soldiers, but with concrete, steel, and billions upon billions of dollars. And the craziest part? Most Filipinos have no idea it's even happening. I'm talking about airports. But not just any airports. I'm talking about a battle so intense, so strategic, that it's literally reshaping the entire geography of how people move through Southeast Asia. And when I started digging into this story, I realized something terrifying. Whoever wins this war doesn't just control airports. They control the future of an entire nation. So let me take you back to where this all started, because the beginning of this story is so ridiculous, it almost sounds like a joke. Except it's not. It's deadly serious. Picture this. It's 2019, and you're at Ninoy Aquino International Airport in Manila. You've just landed after a long flight. You're exhausted. You just want to get to your hotel. But here's the problem. You're not going anywhere. Because you, along with thousands of other passengers, are stuck in a terminal that was built to handle maybe 12 million people a year, but is now choking on over 40 million. The air conditioning barely works. The lines stretch for what feels like miles. There's literally not enough space for everyone's luggage. People are sitting on the floor, sweating, waiting, wondering how the capital city of a country with over 100 million people has an airport that feels like it's held together with duct tape and prayers. And here's the thing that makes it even worse. Manila's airport has consistently ranked as one of the worst airports in the world. Not just in Asia, in the entire world. We're talking about an airport that's been called a nightmare, a disaster, a place where even the most patient traveler loses their mind. And this isn't just embarrassing. It's economically devastating. Because while tourists are avoiding Manila, while businesses are choosing other Southeast Asian hubs for their regional offices, the Philippines is bleeding money. Opportunity is slipping away with every frustrated passenger who decides never to come back. So naturally, you'd think the solution would be simple, right? Build a new airport. Expand the old one. Do something. Anything. But here's where this story gets wild. Because the Philippine government looked at this problem and said, you know what? We're not just going to build one new airport. We're going to build them everywhere. We're going to turn this entire country into an aviation powerhouse. And suddenly, what started as a crisis became an arms race. Now, to understand why this escalated so quickly, you need to understand something about the Philippines that most people don't realize. The Philippines isn't just one place. It's over 7,000 islands scattered across the Pacific. 7,000. Which means if you want to connect this country, if you want people and goods and ideas to flow freely, you can't just build roads and railways. You need airports. Lots of them. And you need them to be good. But for decades, the Philippines neglected this. The country poured money into other things while its aviation infrastructure slowly rotted. And then suddenly, a few years ago, something shifted. Maybe it was the humiliation of having the worst airport in the world. Maybe it was watching Vietnam and Thailand and Indonesia leap ahead with gleaming new terminals. Maybe it was the realization that in the 21st century, countries that control air travel control trade, tourism, and power. Whatever the reason, the Philippines decided to go all in. And when I say all in, I mean we're talking about over $10 billion in airport projects. 10 billion. That's not a typo. That's more money than most countries spend on their entire military budget. And it's all being poured into airports. Let me paint you a picture of just how massive this is. In Bulacan, just north of Manila, they're building what will become the biggest airport in the entire Philippines. We're talking about a facility that will eventually handle 100 million passengers a year. 100 million. That's more than the entire population of the Philippines. This single airport, when it's complete, will be able to process more people annually than most countries see in a decade. The price tag? $6 billion. And construction is already underway. But it doesn't stop there. Down south, in Cebu, they're expanding the Mactan-Cebu International Airport, turning it into a mega hub that can rival anything in Southeast Asia. Over on the tourist paradise of Boracay, they're upgrading the airport so it can handle the millions of tourists who flock there every year. In Davao, in Iloilo, in Baguio, in Clark, everywhere you look, there's construction, expansion, billions being spent. And here's my question. Why? Why now? Why this sudden, almost frantic rush to build airports everywhere? Because here's what I discovered when I started pulling at this thread. This isn't just about fixing a problem. This is about positioning. The Philippines sits in one of the most strategically important spots on the planet. Look at a map. Really look at it. The Philippines is right in the middle of some of the world's busiest shipping lanes. It's the gateway between East Asia and Southeast Asia. It's within striking distance of China, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, Indonesia, and beyond. And in a world where air travel is exploding, where the Asian middle class is growing faster than anywhere else on Earth, whoever controls the airports in this region controls the flow of people, money, and influence. And that's when I realized, this isn't just an infrastructure project. This is geopolitics playing out in concrete and steel. Now, before I go any further, I need to tell you something. My mom told me I'd never hit 5,000 subscribers. She looked at this channel and said, "Why are you wasting your time making videos nobody watches?" And honestly, that hurt. But you know what? I'm going to prove her wrong. And the only way I can do that is with your help. If you're watching this right now and you're even remotely interested in stories like this, stories about power and money and the hidden battles shaping our world, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. It costs you nothing. But it means everything to me. Because every single subscriber is proof that these stories matter, that people care about what's really going on beneath the surface. So please, help me prove my mom wrong. Subscribe, and let's get back to this insane story. Alright, so where were we? Right. The geopolitics of airports. Now, you might be thinking, come on, airports are just buildings. How much power can they really have? And that's exactly what they want you to think. Because the truth is, airports are weapons. Not literal weapons, obviously, but economic weapons. Strategic weapons. Let me explain. When a country builds a world-class airport, they're not just building a place for planes to land. They're building a hub. And hubs are everything. Think about it. If you're flying from Sydney to London, you probably don't fly direct. You stop somewhere in between. Maybe Dubai, maybe Singapore, maybe Hong Kong. And whichever city you stop in, that's where you spend money. That's where airlines base their operations. That's where cargo gets processed, where business deals get made, where tourists get their first impression of a region. Hubs are power multipliers. They turn cities into indispensable nodes in the global network. And the Philippines knows this. They've watched Singapore become one of the richest countries in the world partly because Changi Airport is a masterpiece. They've watched Dubai transform from a desert outpost into a global city because Emirates and Dubai International Airport made it the crossroads of the world. They've watched Thailand and Malaysia and Indonesia invest heavily in their airports and reap massive economic rewards. So the Philippines looked around and said, why not us? And honestly, it's a fair question. Because geographically, the Philippines should be a major hub. It's perfectly positioned. It's got a massive domestic market. It's got growing tourism. It's got a young, English-speaking workforce. On paper, it should be an aviation superpower. But here's the problem, and this is where things get really interesting. The Philippines isn't just competing with other countries. It's competing with itself. See, because the Philippines is 7,000 islands, there's not just one obvious place to build a mega hub. Manila makes sense because it's the capital. It's where the money is. It's where the international connections are. But Cebu makes sense too because it's the gateway to the south. It's already a major domestic hub, and it's closer to the growing markets of Indonesia and Malaysia. Clark makes sense because it's got a massive former U.S. Air Force base with runways that can handle anything, and it's less congested than Manila. Davao makes sense because it's the biggest city in Mindanao and the jumping-off point for the entire southern Philippines. So instead of picking one place and going all in, the Philippines is trying to build multiple hubs, which sounds great in theory. More airports, more connectivity, more opportunity. But in practice, it means the money is being spread thin. It means different airports are competing for the same airlines, the same routes, the same passengers. It means instead of one world-class mega hub that can compete with Singapore or Bangkok, you've got 4 or 5 pretty good airports that might not be enough to attract the big international carriers. And this is where the war really starts. Because it's not just the national government making these decisions. Local governments want airports too. Provincial politicians see what's happening in Manila and Cebu and they think, why should they get all the investment? Why can't we have a world-class airport? So they lobby, they push, they promise votes and support in exchange for airport projects in their regions. And suddenly, you've got airport projects popping up in places that maybe don't need them, at least not yet, while the places that desperately need upgrades are stuck waiting for funding. But there's another layer to this, and it's the part that nobody really talks about publicly, but everyone knows is happening. And that's the money. $10 billion doesn't just appear out of thin air. That money comes from somewhere. Some of it is government funding, sure, but a lot of it is private investment. And private investors don't build airports out of the goodness of their hearts. They build them to make money, which means every airport project comes with contracts, with concessions, with deals that determine who gets to operate restaurants and duty-free shops, who gets to handle ground services, who gets to build the facilities. And in a country like the Philippines, where corruption has historically been a massive problem, where political dynasties control entire regions, where business and politics are often inseparable, you can imagine how complicated these deals get. I'm not saying every airport project is corrupt. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that when you're moving billions of dollars around, when you're deciding which cities get airports and which don't, when you're choosing which companies get contracts, there's enormous opportunity for things to go wrong, for money to disappear, for projects to get delayed or inflated or awarded to connected insiders rather than the most qualified bidders. And the thing is, Filipinos know this. They've seen it happen before. They've watched infrastructure projects balloon in cost, get delayed for years, sometimes never get finished at all. So there's this weird tension where everyone agrees the country needs better airports. But there's also this deep skepticism about whether the money will actually be spent wisely, whether these projects will actually deliver what they promise. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that everything goes according to plan. Let's say all these airports get built on time, on budget, and they're actually good. What happens then? Well, that's when things get really interesting. Because if the Philippines successfully transforms itself into a major aviation hub, if it can siphon off even a fraction of the traffic currently going through Singapore, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in economic activity over the next few decades. Think about the jobs. Not just the obvious ones like pilots and flight attendants and baggage handlers, but all the secondary jobs. The hotels that spring up around airports, the restaurants, the shopping centers, the business parks, the logistics companies that set up warehouses nearby because they can now get goods in and out of the country faster and cheaper. The tourism industry that explodes because suddenly it's easier and more affordable for people to visit. The overseas Filipino workers who can come home more often because there are more flights and lower prices. The businesses that relocate to the Philippines because it's now a viable hub for regional operations. This is what's at stake. This is why billions are being spent. Because airports aren't just infrastructure. They're engines of growth. They're the foundation for an entirely new economic era. But here's the catch, and this is the part that keeps me up at night. What if it doesn't work? What if the Philippines spends all this money, builds all these airports, and then can't convince airlines to actually use them? Because here's the dirty secret of the airport business. Airports don't make money from landing fees. They make money from passengers spending money inside the terminal. Which means you need volume. You need airlines bringing in thousands of passengers every day. And airlines are ruthless. They go wherever makes them the most money. If Singapore offers them a better deal, they'll fly to Singapore. If Bangkok is more convenient for passengers, they'll fly to Bangkok. So the Philippines isn't just building airports. It's going to have to compete. It's going to have to offer lower fees than its competitors, better facilities, faster processing times, more attractive destinations. It's going to have to convince major carriers like Emirates, Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airways, Cathay Pacific, that Manila or Cebu or Clark should be their hub for Southeast Asia. And that's incredibly hard to do when you're up against cities that have been perfecting this game for decades. And then there's the other problem, China. I haven't mentioned China yet, but China is the elephant in the room for everything happening in the Philippines right now. China has been aggressively building infrastructure across Southeast Asia for years as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. Chinese companies have built ports, railways, power plants, and yes, airports all over the region. And they're very interested in the Philippines. Not just because of geography, not just because of economics, but because the Philippines sits right on China's doorstep, right along the contested South China Sea. So when the Philippines starts building all these airports, China is watching. And China is thinking strategically. If Chinese companies can get involved in these airport projects, if they can secure contracts, if they can make the Philippines dependent on Chinese expertise and Chinese financing, then they gain influence. They gain leverage. Not military leverage, necessarily, but economic and political leverage. The kind that shapes how countries vote at the UN, how they position themselves on territorial disputes, how they align themselves in the great power competition between China and the United States. And the United States is watching too. The U.S. has military bases in the Philippines. It has a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines. It sees the Philippines as a crucial ally in the Pacific. So when China starts getting involved in Philippine infrastructure, the US gets nervous. And suddenly, airport projects become part of a much larger game. A game about influence and alliances and the future balance of power in the Pacific. This is what I mean when I say this is a war. It's not being fought with tanks and missiles. It's being fought with construction contracts and airline routes and investment deals. But the stakes are just as high. So here's where we are right now. The Philippines has committed billions to this airport expansion. Construction is underway on multiple projects. The government is promising that within the next decade, the Philippines will have world-class aviation infrastructure that can compete with anyone in the region. Politicians are making speeches about how this will transform the economy, create millions of jobs, turn the Philippines into the next great success story of Southeast Asia. But there are also delays. There are cost overruns. There are concerns about whether airlines will actually come. There are questions about debt, about whether the Philippines can afford all of this, about what happens if the economic benefits don't materialize as quickly as promised. There are worries about Chinese influence, about sovereignty, about whether the Philippines is trading long-term independence for short-term infrastructure. And in the middle of all this, ordinary Filipinos are watching and waiting. They're tired of embarrassing airports. They're tired of watching other countries surge ahead while the Philippines struggles with basic infrastructure. They want to believe that this time will be different, that these projects will actually get finished, that their country can finally claim its place as a major player in the global economy. But they've been disappointed before. They've seen grand promises turn into half-finished projects and wasted money. So there's hope, but there's also skepticism. There's excitement, but there's also anxiety. And that's where this story stands right now. The money is being spent. The airports are being built. The war for control of Philippine airspace is in full swing. But nobody knows yet who's going to win. Will it be the Philippines itself, finally breaking through and becoming the hub it's always had the potential to be? Will it be Singapore and Bangkok and the other established hubs, maintaining their dominance and relegating the Philippines to a secondary role? Will it be China, using infrastructure to extend its influence across Southeast Asia? Or will it be chaos, a fragmented mess of competing airports that never quite coalesce into a coherent strategy? I don't have the answer. Nobody does. Because this story is still being written. The next 10 years will tell us everything. They'll tell us whether the Philippines made the right bet, whether all those billions were worth it, whether airports really can reshape a nation's destiny. And I'll be watching. I'll be following this story. Because this is about so much more than airports. This is about ambition and power and the future of an entire region. This is about whether a country can will itself into greatness through sheer determination and concrete and steel. And honestly, I'm rooting for the Philippines. I'm rooting for them to pull this off, to prove the skeptics wrong, to build something truly extraordinary. Because if they do, it won't just change the Philippines. It'll change the entire calculus of power in Southeast Asia. So that's the airport war. That's why billions are being spent. That's what's really happening right now while most of the world isn't paying attention. And if you found this story as fascinating as I did, if you want to see more deep dives into the hidden battles shaping our world, then do me that favor I asked for earlier. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stick around. Because there are so many more stories like this, so many more wars being fought in silence, and somebody needs to tell them. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.